Pain is the secret alphabet through which the divine writes his nearness upon the soul. What appears as breaking is only the language of remembrance, the trembling of form before the weight of the unseen. The heart that aches is not being abandoned. It is being rewritten, refined, until it can carry the fragrance of eternity without shattering. The mystic knows that the sharpness of sorrow is not cruelty, but mercy taking form. Every sigh, every silence, every sleepless night is a verse descending without words. When the fire of pain enters, it does not destroy it, illuminates the hidden corners of being where heedlessness once slept. Through pain, the beloved teaches you the taste of return. The seeker who listens deeply discovers that pain has its own music, a rhythm born of divine remembrance. Within its pulse lies the truth that joy could never teach, that the beloved is nearest not in ease, but in the trembling moments when you think you've lost him. For in that trembling, he whispers times I was never apart from you. I only made you ache so you could finally feel where I dwell. Suffering is not the absence of the beloved. It is his nearness made visible through fire. When pain enters, it carries a secret brightness, a hidden light concealed within the burning. The heart, though scorched, becomes translucent, and through its cracks, illumination escapes. What appears as agony is in truth the polishing of the soul, preparing it to reflect what cannot be seen through comfort. The flame consumes what is false until only presence remains. The mystic knows that the fire is not punishment, but purification. The beloved sends it not to destroy, but to reveal. When ease dulls perception, pain arrives like a spark in the dark, awakening what had fallen asleep. It is through burning that gold is separated from dust. So too the soul is refined. Each ache, another act of divine craftsmanship, shaping it toward its origin. The seeker who flees the flame flees his own unveiling. Pain is not the enemy, it is the doorway into clarity. When the heart stops resisting, it feels the warmth behind the fire, the compassion that breathes within the very thing it feared. What was once unbearable becomes sacred, for it no longer hides its source. The flame turns from torment to teacher. The fire of suffering does not approach those who are empty. It seeks those capable of light. The more love a soul carries, the greater its longing to be purified. Every blaze, then, is measured with mercy, burning away only what conceals the truth. When the smoke clears, the seeker sees not ruin, but radiance, the face of the beloved revealed through pain's glow. To stand within the fire is to stand where distance dissolves. The heat draws the heart inward, closer to its center, where divine presence waits in silence. It is not the body that burns, but the illusions it held dear. The ego cries, but the soul rejoices, for what perishes in suffering was never real to begin with. What remains is nearer than breath, softer than light. The flame of suffering whispers a truth forgotten by the world, that comfort blinds and pain awakens. Ease builds walls, hardship breaks them down. When the walls fall, the light of nearness floods in, filling the space once held by self. Thus, suffering becomes mercy disguised in heat, the beloved's way of turning the heart toward its true home. Every tear that falls within the fire becomes a jewel of remembrance. The heart, melting under the weight of sorrow, begins to shine. What once felt like loss transforms into clarity. The mystic understands that every drop of anguish is a verse from the hidden book of love, each one spelling out a single truth, that the flame and the light are one. The fire's purpose is not to consume, but to reveal what cannot be burned. Beneath the ashes of despair lies the indestructible spark, the soul's remembrance of its source. Pain uncovers it by stripping away everything that hides it. And when that spark is seen, the seeker knows that the flame was never against him. It was his own light calling him back to itself. The closer the fire comes, the more the self resists. But resistance only feeds the illusion of distance. When surrender replaces struggle, the fire no longer hurts, it heals. it becomes warmth, guidance, revelation. What once was seen as wrath is now recognized as love too vast to express gently. The flame's language is intensity, but its meaning is mercy. The mystic stands in the fire and calls it prayer. Each wave of heat becomes a breath of remembrance. The burning turns to rhythm, the rhythm to praise. Through the ache, he begins to hear the heartbeat of the universe, the pulse of divine love that sustains even the pain itself. To suffer consciously is to listen to God in the most intimate of ways. When pain deepens, words fail, and only silence remains. But this silence is not emptiness. It is full of presence. The flame has burned through language, leaving only understanding. The seeker stands bare before the beloved, without need to speak, for the fire has already said everything that could be said. This is not the end of suffering. It is the transformation of it into light. The lamp of nearness is lit by this very flame. Its glow does not come from oil or wick, but from surrender. The heart becomes the vessel, the fire, the essence, the illumination, the meeting point between longing and mercy. When the seeker gazes into this light, he sees not flame or form, but reflection, the divine face shimmering within. Suffering, when embraced, reveals its secret gentleness. Beneath the burning is a tenderness too sacred for comfort to carry. Pain does not simply remove what is false, it blesses what remains. Each wound becomes a mark of intimacy, a sign that the divine has touched you, leaving warmth where separation once lived. There are moments when the fire burns so deeply that the self thinks it will vanish, and it does. Yet what disappears is not life, but illusion. In that vanishing, the soul glimpses eternity, a presence without boundary, a love without condition. The fire, then, is not the end of the seeker. It is his beginning as light. The mystic learns that suffering is the most eloquent form of remembrance. It compels the soul to return to the center, to the place untouched by pain. From there, the seeker looks upon the flame not as enemy, but as mirror, reflecting the beloved's desire to be known. What once felt like separation now becomes recognition, the realization that pain was love, seeking expression. The lamp of nearness shines brightest in those who have burned longest. Their light is steady, their presence gentle, for they have walked through the fire and emerged as warmth. They carry no bitterness, for they know that every blaze was a conversation with the divine, fierce in sound, but soft in meaning. The fire is holy precisely because it leaves nothing untouched. It purifies thought, memory, desire, until all that remains is the soul's transparency. In this clarity, the seeker sees that the beloved was never far. He was the flame itself, burning away the veils that kept the heart from recognizing its own reflection. When the mystic finally bows within the fire, he ceases to ask for escape. Instead, he whispers, asterisk, let it burn until only you remain, asterisk. In that surrender, suffering completes its purpose. The flame becomes light, the ache becomes peace, and what was once unbearable becomes sacred nearness. The lamp of nearness, born of fire, now burns quietly within the heart. It needs no oil, for its fuel is remembrance. Each flicker is a breath of divine love, repeating itself through the seeker's being. What was once sorrow is now serenity, the steady glow of a soul illuminated by its own transformation. And in the stillness after the fire, when smoke turns to air and pain turns to peace, the seeker finally understands. The flame was never sent to hurt, but to reveal. Suffering was the language of divine intimacy, the beloved's touch in the language of fire. And in that light, the heart whispers, what burned me was also what brought me home. Brokenness is not the end of beauty. It is where beauty begins to breathe. The soul that cracks open under the weight of sorrow is not losing itself. It is revealing the form it was meant to take. The fractures of the heart become the lines through which light escapes, the secret pathways of divine artistry. What breaks you does not destroy you. It chisels you into the shape the beloved wishes to behold. Every wound carries its own fragrance. When pain deepens, the scent of sincerity rises, the perfume of surrender. Unseen but unmistakable, the mystic knows that beauty is not in perfection, but in vulnerability, in the trembling softness that remains after every certainty has been burned away. It is there, in that trembling, that the reflection of the beloved becomes clearest. Brokenness is the mirror where the self vanishes and truth begins. The one who has never been shattered cannot see beyond form, cannot feel the depth of mercy that waits behind collapse. The divine reveals himself through the cracks, not through the flawless. Each fracture becomes a window into the eternal, a reminder that the soul was not made to be whole by itself. The heart that has been broken becomes a vessel for grace. In the silence that follows pain, it begins to listen more deeply, not to the world, but to the voice of the unseen. The pieces do not reassemble as they were. They rearrange into a new pattern, a mosaic of remembrance and surrender. The beauty that bleeds through such hearts is not decoration, but revelation. When love enters a heart, it must first dismantle what resists it. The breaking is not destruction, but invitation. The beloved breaks the heart so that it might expand, so that mercy might have room to dwell. The pain of separation is the preparation for union. In each tear, the soul finds the trace of divine touch, proof that it has been chosen to feel the weight of love. The mystic does not hide his scars. He adorns them with gratitude, for he knows that each scar is a verse of revelation written in flesh. These marks are not reminders of pain, but signatures of presence, signs that the divine has passed through. The more a heart has been wounded, the more clearly it glows with remembrance. For suffering polishes what comfort leaves dull. Beauty is not smoothness, it is depth. The ocean appears calm, but its beauty lies in the unseen currents below. So too, the soul, its broken places, are the depths where wisdom sleeps. Those who live only on the surface will never hear its music. To be broken is to be invited below the waves, where silence speaks of endless compassion. When the vessel of the self shatters, something ancient escapes the soul's original light, hidden beneath layers of identity. Pain does not create this light, it uncovers it. The one who learns to see through tears begins to see as God sees through mercy. The broken heart becomes his mirror, reflecting love without distortion. The divine hides beauty in brokenness because it cannot be faked. Perfection can be imitated, fracture cannot. True radiance is born of surrender, not effort. The mystic does not seek to be flawless, he seeks to be real. And in being real, he becomes luminous. His brokenness is not weakness. It is proof that he has lived where others fear to feel. When the heart is broken, silence becomes holy. Words fall away because meaning has already been spoken through pain. The mystic sits in that silence and listens, not for answers, but for presence. And in that listening, he discovers that what bleeds from him is not despair, but light translated into feeling. The wound becomes the alphabet of divine communication. The beauty that bleeds through brokenness cannot be seen by ordinary sight. It reveals itself only to those who have been softened by sorrow. The eyes of the untouched see wounds. The eyes of the awakened see windows. Every crack becomes an aperture through which eternity peers into time, whispering, asterisk. You were never broken, only opened, asterisk. Pain refines the soul the way fire refines metal. It burns away what cannot hold light and leaves only what glows. The mystic welcomes this burning, for he knows the cost of beauty is surrender. The furnace of grief is not punishment but transformation, and from its heat emerges the heart as pure as a mirror polished by divine breath. The broken heart carries a strange tenderness. It no longer judges, no longer demands. It feels deeply because it has known both loss and mercy. It loves not despite the cracks, but because of them. The mystic learns that compassion is born from fracture, the knowing that all creation bleeds with the same longing for the one who broke and blessed it. When the self falls apart, the illusion of control falls with it. What remains is vulnerability, the state nearest to God. In that rawness, the soul finally becomes transparent enough for love to pass through. The mystic does not rebuild the old form. He allows the new one to emerge. Brokenness, when surrendered, is not ruin, but rebirth. There is a beauty that cannot exist without pain, a music that plays only when the heart cracks open. Each note of that song is shaped by surrender, each pause filled with remembrance. The listener who closes his eyes hears the rhythm of divine tenderness beating within his own ache. This is not sadness, it is sacred recognition. The beloved hides himself in the places where we least wish to look, beneath sorrow, beneath loss, beneath every silent cry. He waits patient, radiant, unashamed of the mess he enters. The mystic understands this secret, that love does not avoid pain, it dwells within it. To find God is to find Him in the very place where you thought He was absent. Brokenness is how the infinite enters the finite. A heart that remains whole is too narrow for eternity. The cracks widen it, letting the endless flow in. What was once small enough for comfort becomes vast enough for revelation. Through pain, the soul learns expansion not outwardly, but inwardly, into the immeasurable depths of divine nearness. The mystic sees beauty not as perfection, but as transparency, the degree to which something allows the divine to shine through. A broken heart, stripped of pride, becomes the clearest vessel for light. The beauty that bleeds through it is not its own. It is the radiance of the one who chose it as his mirror. When the heart finally stops hiding its wounds, it discovers peace, not because the pain has vanished, but because the beloved has entered it completely. The ache becomes gentle, the tears become prayer, and what once felt like loss turns into remembrance. The mystic whispers, "My brokenness was never my failure. It was my meeting place with you." The story of brokenness ends where love begins. The beauty that bleeds through is the proof that the soul has touched something eternal. Nothing truly breaks in the presence of God. It transforms. Every fracture is an opening, every wound a revelation. And when the heart looks upon its scars, it no longer sees pain, only the fingerprints of the beloved, left as signs that he was here and never left. Pain is a teacher that speaks without words, and only the heart knows its language. The mind protests, but the soul listens. Beneath every ache lies a lesson too sacred for sound, a message whispered through the trembling of being. When the heart begins to hear, it realizes that pain was never cruelty, but translation, the way divine wisdom becomes audible to a soul asleep in comfort. The mystic understands that ease makes the heart deaf, comfort numbs the ear of the spirit, while pain sharpens it into awareness. In moments of suffering, the noise of the world fades, and what remains is the pulse of divine intent. Each throb becomes a syllable of revelation, each tear a verse. It is through this subtle hearing that the heart begins to understand what intellect cannot contain. Pain is the ear through which the heart listens to God. When sorrow deepens, something within grows quiet enough to hear the subtle call, the voice that speaks beneath appearances, saying, "I am here, even in this." This hearing is not auditory, it is remembrance awakening within. The seeker realizes that pain is not an interruption to faith, it is its unveiling. There are truths too vast for joy to carry. Only pain has the depth to hold them. In happiness, the heart floats. In pain, it sinks, and in that descent, it finds what lies beneath the surface of existence. The mystic does not curse the descent, for he knows that the pearl of knowledge is hidden in the ocean of suffering. One must drown to find what cannot be found upon the shore. When pain enters, it rearranges the inner landscape. The familiar becomes strange, the simple becomes sacred. The heart, stripped of its usual patterns, begins to perceive in new ways. What once seemed like darkness now shimmers with meaning. The eye closes, but the ear of the soul opens, and what it hears is not despair, but direction. The beloved speaks most clearly in silence, and pain is the silence that humbles the soul. In that stillness, the heart discovers a language older than words, the vibration of divine presence moving through sorrow. The mystic listens not to escape the pain, but to uncover the melody hidden within it. The ache becomes rhythm, the tears become the song. Pain teaches the heart that surrender is the highest form of understanding. It dismantles the illusion of control and returns the soul to the humility of dependence. In the classroom of suffering, the only wisdom learned is how to bow not in defeat, but in reverence. For every wound teaches the same truth, that there is no distance between the wound and the one who heals. When pain deepens, time itself slows, and the eternal becomes audible. The heart hears what the mind could never analyze, the sound of being sustained even while breaking. In that paradox lies the secret, that pain is not outside the will of the divine, but its most intimate expression. What hurts is what is being transformed into awareness. The mystic learns to listen for mercy in the middle of ache. Pain, when listened to rather than resisted, begins to soften. Its sharpness dissolves into tenderness, revealing the kindness hidden within the trial. What once felt like punishment becomes participation, the heart joining in the rhythm of divine refinement. Every ache has its origin in love. The beloved hides his voice within the pulse of longing, teaching through the very thing that seems unbearable. The more one listens, the more one hears, not pain, but presence. The fire that burns also whispers, "I am shaping you into a mirror. Endure until you shine." Pain humbles the soul into simplicity. It removes the excess of thought and leaves only awareness raw, unadorned, real. In that nakedness, the heart recognizes what it always sought, the stillness that rests beneath all motion. The mystic does not seek to end pain, for he knows its disappearance would end the conversation. He seeks to listen until even fire becomes fragrance. When pain is met with resistance, it screams. When met with silence, it speaks. The seeker learns that the volume of suffering depends on the depth of listening. The heart that yields begins to hear. The wisdom carried in each wave of hurt, the invitation to trust, the call to patience, the promise of meaning. Suffering is the echo of the divine, reminding the soul where it came from. The heart's hearing is not developed through reading or ritual, but through experience. The deeper the wound, the clearer the sound. For in the hollow spaces carved by loss, the divine voice resonates most purely. The mystic bows before his ache as before revelation, for he knows that pain is scripture written in the language of feeling. Pain is the veil that conceals and reveals simultaneously. To the one who fears it, it hides. To the one who listens, it opens. The heart that dares to hear its own breaking discovers that every crack is a doorway to mercy. The mystic understands that what bleeds in him is not despair. It is divine attention flowing through his being. Through pain, the heart learns how to discern presence in absence. It realizes that distance was never real, that even in loss, the beloved never departed. What feels like emptiness is actually fullness beyond comprehension. The silence inside sorrow is not void. It is saturated with speech unspoken, with meaning too subtle for sound. Pain teaches through paradox. It wounds to heal, breaks to rebuild, silences to reveal. The mystic accepts this contradiction as truth, that love must sometimes disguise itself as hurt so that the soul may awaken. The one who understands this no longer fears the ache. He welcomes it as the language of divine instruction. The more deeply the heart listens, the softer it becomes. Compassion arises not from learning, but from hurting. The one who has heard the voice of pain can no longer judge another's suffering. He becomes gentle, carrying in his silence the fragrance of understanding, the kind that cannot be taught, only lived. Every pain carries within it a question. Can you still see me here? The seeker who answers with faith transforms the pain into revelation. What once felt unbearable becomes sacred testimony, the heart's proof that it can hear the divine even in fire. Such hearing is not learned through study. It is earned through surrender. When the heart finally learns the language of pain, it realizes that the beloved was never speaking from afar. Every ache was his whisper, every silence his breath. The lesson was never about endurance, but recognition. To suffer is to be addressed directly, to be taught in the dialect of the infinite. Pain itself falls silent, for its purpose is fulfilled. The heart that has heard now knows. What once wounded has turned into wisdom. What once burned has become light. The mystic no longer asks to be spared suffering, he asks only to keep hearing. For in every ache, he remembers the voice that said, Asterisk, I hurt you, only to make you listen to my love. Asterisk, the divine does not come closer. He removes what hides his nearness. What you call distance is only the shadow cast by your own perception. When the veil begins to thin, it feels like fire, for the self resists disappearance. The touch of the beloved burns, not because he is far, but because he is unbearably near. The flame you feel is his hand, dissolving the illusion that there was ever space between you. The mystic understands that distance is mercy for the unready heart. The veil protects until the gaze can bear the brilliance, yet the longing for proximity grows until mercy must become fire. That fire is love in its purest form, consuming, unrelenting, intimate. It burns away every boundary that claims separation. Through that burning, the soul learns that what it thought was loss was in fact revelation. The divine touch arrives not with movement, but with unveiling. It strips the heart of everything it clings to, for safety, identity, thought, memory, even the idea of love. What remains after this burning is the awareness that nothing ever stood apart. The fire leaves no distance, for distance was never real. It was a language for learning how to yearn. When the beloved touches the soul, time collapses. The seeker no longer moves toward him. He realizes he was never away. The touch is recognition, a remembrance that existence itself is sustained within his embrace. The burning is the friction of awakening, the shock of knowing that the one sought outside was the very breath seeking within. This burning is not destruction, but purification. What perishes is illusion, what survives is essence. The fire reveals by consuming the false. It devours every image you held of yourself until you stand transparent, a mirror through which the divine sees himself. The pain of the touch is not harm, it is healing too pure for comfort. The mystic knows that the fire is love disguised as separation. To feel the distance is to be invited closer, and to be burned is to enter union. The flame does not move from him to you, it awakens within you, showing that the light you feared was always your own. When the illusion of two dissolves, the burning becomes brilliance. The divine touch is not a moment. It is a movement without beginning or end. It unfolds eternally within the heart that surrenders. To feel it is to be rewritten, to realize that you are not a servant outside his presence, but a verse within his eternal speech. The burning clarifies this truth, erasing the margins that separated the reader from the word. Pain is the sign that the false self is melting. The ego resists the touch, for it knows it cannot survive what it will reveal. Yet this is mercy, for only by dying can it cease to veil the real. The mystic accepts the fire as his teacher, bowing before the warmth that strips him bare. What is lost is illusion. What is found is the unbroken nearness of the divine. The touch of God is felt first as absence, then as ache, and finally as annihilation. Each stage draws the soul nearer to its origin. Absence sharpens longing. Longing invites contact. Contact erases separation. The final burning is the moment when the seeker realizes that the one he reached for has always been reaching through him. When the fire enters, the heart trembles, not from fear, but from recognition. The light is too intimate, too vast, too near. It does not come from above or beyond, but from within, rising through every atom that carries his breath. The seeker, undone by this realization, can only whisper, asterisk, "You were never away. I was blind in your presence." Asterisk, the flame of divine nearness burns quietly, without smoke. It consumes only what pretends to be other. Every false identity falls away in its glow. Nationality, name, pride, even piety. The mystic stands naked before the beloved, neither servant nor saint, simply existence aware of its source. In that simplicity, all separation ceases to make sense. To be touched by the divine is to lose the idea of touching. There is no you to be touched, no him to do the touching. The fire reveals this secret, that all contact is remembrance, and remembrance is reunion. The burning hurts because the self clings to boundaries, and every boundary must dissolve in love. What remains is awareness without edge. The illusion of distance is the last veil to fall. It persists, even in devotion, even in prayer, whispering, asterisk, "I am here," and "You are there," asterisk. But the touch of the beloved silences this duality. It teaches the heart that prayer itself is his movement within you, the echo of his own longing to be known. You were never calling to him. He was calling to himself through you. The mystic feels the burning as sweetness, not pain. It is the warmth of belonging returning. What once felt like separation now feels like remembrance, the rediscovery of a unity too close to be perceived before. The heart glows with this nearness, shining like metal refined in divine flame. The touch does not end when the fire subsides. It becomes the pulse of being. The mystic carries it as serenity, a soft warmth that fills every silence. Even in hardship, he feels it. For once the illusion is burned away, nothing remains outside divine presence. Every breath becomes touch, every heartbeat a remembrance. Through the burning, the seeker learns that love is not something that connects two. It is what erases the idea of two. The fire of the divine touch reveals that there has only ever been one flame, expressing itself through countless sparks. To feel this is to be undone, not destroyed, but expanded beyond self into infinity. The illusion of distance returns sometimes, as shadow returns when light shifts. But the mystic no longer fears it. He knows the shadow is proof of light, and the ache is proof of love. The fire need not always blaze. Sometimes it glows gently, reminding the heart that nearness is constant, even when unseen. When the self is finally burned away, the soul stands luminous and still. No thought remains of journey or destination. The touch has fulfilled its work. There is no more seeking, only being. What remains is the silent awareness of unity, where even love dissolves into recognition. And so the mystic bows, not before an image or an idea, but before the touch itself, the fire that revealed there was never distance to cross. He whispers, "The flame I feared was your embrace, and the burning I endured was your mercy consuming the lie of separation." Asterisk. In that knowing, he becomes the light that once burned him, a witness that what seemed far was always within. Darkness is not the absence of God, it is his unseen face turned inward. What you call night is the cloak of mercy wrapped around the eyes of creation, so that the heart may learn to see without light. Within that stillness, the soul discovers another kind of vision, one not made of sight, but of surrender. The mystic enters the dark, not to escape the world, but to encounter what brilliance hides. When light blinds with clarity, darkness teaches through depth. It draws the seeker inward, away from form and into essence. What the world calls emptiness, the mystic calls fullness, a space too vast for the mind to contain. In that divine obscurity, Understanding is replaced by intimacy. You cannot see where you are, yet you know you are held. The heart must learn the sacred art of unseeing. In the darkness, form dissolves, boundaries fade, and meaning ceases to be divided. What once seemed loss becomes invitation. What once felt like silence becomes speech. The divine hides himself in shadow, so that the soul may discover that true vision begins where light surrenders. Darkness, too, is a revelation, but one whispered rather than shown. Its lessons are written in pauses, its mercy carried in weight. To the impatient, it feels like abandonment. To the awakened, it feels like being carried. The mystic learns that divine love often hides its tenderness behind what appears empty, so the soul may learn to trust beyond appearance. When the world grows dim, the heart begins to glow. What light cannot reveal, longing unveils. The seeker who walks through darkness with remembrance discovers that the absence of clarity is the presence of closeness. The veil that seems to separate is in truth the fabric of mercy itself, protecting the fragile gaze from the overwhelming brilliance of nearness. The darkness is not punishment, it is preparation. The beloved folds his mercy into shadow to make it bearable for the finite heart. If he revealed too much light, the soul would vanish in awe. Thus, the night is compassion in disguise, the soft covering that allows the fire of love to burn gently rather than consume. The mystic learns that light and darkness are not opposites, but partners in revelation. The day declares his majesty, the night whispers his tenderness. The same truth expressed through two languages, one radiant, one hidden. To know him fully, the seeker must be fluent in both. In the folds of darkness, the soul hears the heartbeat of creation, steady, merciful, infinite. It realizes that life is not sustained by clarity, but by mystery. The unseen is the womb of being, and every moment of confusion is a seed waiting to bloom into understanding. The darkness is not emptiness, it is gestation. The night of the soul comes not to end faith, but to refine it. When all light withdraws, only truth remains. You cannot pretend in darkness, you can only be. The mystic, stripped of certainty, learns that faith is not seeing it, is knowing without needing proof. And in that knowing, darkness itself becomes illumination. When the heart ceases to fear what it cannot comprehend, it finds peace in shadow. The mystic no longer seeks escape, for he recognizes that mercy has many faces, and one of them is night. The quiet, the uncertainty, the ache, all are forms of divine care shaping the heart into stillness. Darkness folds itself around the soul like a prayer unspoken. It hides not to deny, but to nurture. Just as the seed must rest in soil before it rises, so too must the spirit rest in unknowing before it awakens to vision. What appears as silence is divine speech too vast for sound. The mystic listens not with ears, but with being. Mercy hides within what seems merciless. When the light fades, the ego trembles, but the soul rejoices. It recognizes this descent as return a retreat into the divine's hidden chamber. In that interior night, the seeker realizes that the same hand that extinguished the light also lights the heart from within. There are lessons that can only be learned in the dark. The soul must lose its outer bearings to discover its inner compass. The mystic walks not by sight, but by remembrance, guided by a flame unseen. This is not blindness, it is trust. For what is faith, if not walking in the dark while knowing you are not alone? Darkness teaches the heart patience, the ability to dwell without demand. It trains the soul to love without seeing, to believe without understanding. And when this patience ripens, it becomes serenity, for the seeker realizes that waiting is not emptiness, but communion. Time itself becomes a form of prayer. When sorrow casts its shadow, mercy waits beneath. The mystic bends his head into the night and feels its softness cool, infinite, maternal. The darkness does not press against him, it enfolds him. In that embrace, he discovers that he was never lost. He was only being held in a quieter kind of light. The hidden mercy of darkness is gentler than revelation. It allows the heart to rest, to listen, to feel. There is no striving here, only being. The mystic no longer chases the dawn. He learns to love the night, for he has found the sun within it. Every shadow, every silence, every pause, all are verses of the same unseen scripture. The beloved cloaks himself in darkness to protect the seeker from the blinding immediacy of truth. His nearness is too intense for vision, so he becomes invisible. The mystic understands this paradox, that concealment is a deeper form of presence. In hiding, he shows his mercy. When light returns, it is softer, humbler, wiser. The one who has walked through darkness no longer takes brightness for granted. He has seen mercy in its most hidden form and carries it now as inner glow. He no longer fears the night, for he has met its keeper. The mystic realizes that darkness and mercy are one movement, the breathing in and out of divine compassion. The night is not the opposite of day, it is its secret continuation. In the heart that has learned to see through both light and darkness, kiss. And in that meeting, the seeker whispers, "Even in my blindness, you were the sight that guided me home." Sorrow is the tongue the soul learns when joy becomes too shallow to speak the truth. When the heart breaks, words lose their edges and become light, soft and trembling, carrying meanings no sound can contain. What the seeker once called pain begins to transform into devotion, an unspoken dialogue between the finite and the infinite. Love hides itself in grief so that remembrance may become natural, flowing like breath through every wound. The mystic knows that sorrow is not the opposite of love. It is its hidden dialect. Joy declares, but sorrow listens. Joy sings, but sorrow kneels. In grief, the heart learns humility, and in that humility, it hears what bliss could never reveal, that love is not a feeling, but an existence woven into the essence of being. The beloved speaks most clearly through tears, for tears cleanse the ear of the heart. When sorrow deepens, the mind becomes silent, and the soul begins to translate. What once felt unbearable now glows with purpose. Each ache becomes a syllable of longing, each sigh a verse of remembrance. In that language, pain ceases to accuse and begins to worship. The mystic whispers, not in complaint, but in confession times, "You were the meaning behind every ache." Asterisk. Sorrow refines the heart, the way fire refines metal. It burns away the noise, the distractions, the illusions of self-sufficiency. What remains is simplicity, a heart laid bare, unclothed of pretense, trembling in truth. The beloved writes, his messages not on joy, but on the softened clay of grief. Only when the heart cracks can the ink of love seep through. The language of love cannot be learned in ease. It is born in the furnace of loss, tempered by surrender. When the heart ceases to ask why and begins to whisper you, sorrow changes flavor, from bitterness to sweetness, from despair to intimacy. The mystic does not escape suffering. He translates it into praise. There is a moment when pain ceases to wound and begins to illuminate. The heart, once afraid of its own breaking, realizes that the ache is not punishment, but invitation. Each sorrow is a door narrow, burning, but leading directly into presence. In walking through it, the seeker discovers that what he thought was loss was simply the beloved calling him closer. The divine hides himself in the folds of sorrow, so that love might ripen in silence. When joy fills the cup, the soul forgets. When sorrow empties it, the cup becomes ready to receive again. This is mercy disguised as ache, the breaking that prepares the heart for depth. In emptiness, love speaks without interference. Sorrow teaches love its purity. Joy can be borrowed, sorrow must be lived. Through grief, the heart learns fidelity to love, even when the light is hidden. to remember even when everything visible disappears. The mystic finds that the truest form of love is not felt in union, but in longing. To miss him is also to meet him. When the heart finally stops resisting sorrow, it begins to hear its rhythm. What once felt chaotic becomes coherent, a sacred melody echoing the pulse of the divine. This is the moment when pain transforms into remembrance, and remembrance into peace. The heart learns to speak in silence, to love, without needing to feel loved in return. In sorrow, the self unravels. The roles, the ambitions, the masks all dissolve, leaving the soul exposed before the source. It is in that nakedness that love reveals its true nature, not as possession, but as presence. The mystic bows, realizing that what he mourned was never truly gone, it had only changed form. Every tear is a letter written in the alphabet of the unseen. The heart reads them one by one, learning the grammar of surrender. The mystic does not rush to translate. He lets each drop fall and speak. In time, sorrow becomes scripture verses of love, written in liquid devotion. Pain is the first language the soul ever knew, for existence itself began with separation, the longing of the created for the creator. Sorrow is the echo of that first memory, the reminder that all return begins with yearning. The mystic understands this as a blessing, not a curse. The ache is proof that love has not died, but grown too vast for containment. When sorrow matures, it becomes luminous. The same tears that once blurred vision now clarify it. The mystic no longer asks to be spared grief, for he sees in every ache the trace of divine artistry. The sculptor's hand must strike the stone to reveal the form within. So too, the beloved strikes the heart, not to wound it, but to unveil its hidden grace. The heart that has learned sorrow becomes fluent in compassion. It cannot separate its own ache from the ache of others. Love becomes universal, the reflection of the one pain that all creation shares, the longing to return. In that recognition, the mystic sees every tear as his own, and every prayer as a single voice rising to the same sky. Sorrow strips the heart of pride. It teaches that love is not triumph, but tenderness. When all defenses fall, the heart learns to lean not in weakness, but in trust. The mystic no longer clings to joy or flees from grief. He dwells in both, as in the breath of the beloved, inhaling union, exhaling separation. There comes a moment when the seeker no longer distinguishes between joy and sorrow. He sees both as letters from the same handwriting, one written in gold, the other in shadow. Together, they form the complete name of love. The mystic bows before both, saying, asterisk, every feeling is a verse, and every verse leads me to you. The language of love is not spoken by the tongue, but by the heart in surrender. Pain teaches the syntax, loss teaches the rhythm, and patience teaches the tone. When these merge, sorrow becomes poetry, the kind that cannot be written, only lived. The mystic becomes its living verse, reciting without words. The more deeply sorrow enters, the wider the heart becomes. What once felt like breaking now feels like expansion, the stretching of the soul to make room for the infinite. Love, once a desire, becomes a state. The mystic realizes that the ache itself is God's way of keeping the heart awake. When the heart finally comprehends that sorrow and love are not two, the illusion of tragedy vanishes. Every sigh becomes remembrance, every wound a meeting place. The mystic no longer prays for relief, but for understanding. He whispers, asterisk, if you send sorrow, let it be the kind that draws me nearer. Asterisk, when the last tear falls, sorrow dissolves into its source. Love unbound, love unspoken, love eternal. The heart that once grieved now glows, for it has learned to hear the beloved's voice in every ache. What once hurt now heals, for the wound has learned to speak his name. The mystic smiles through quiet tears, knowing that pain was never pain, It was love, teaching him how to listen. When the soul burns in the fire of transformation, it imagines only ruin, but the ashes remember the flame. From that silence of what was, a shimmer begins to rise. What seemed like ending was preparation. What appeared as loss was unveiling. The ashes are not the remains of failure, but the soil of rebirth. The mystic bends close and sees, even in what has turned to dust, the divine breath still glows, patient and alive. Ashes are the proof of nearness. Nothing can turn to ash unless it has been touched by fire. The soul that has been reduced to nothing has already met the beloved in his most intimate form, as the flame that consumes illusions. What dies in that heat is what was never real. What survives is the essence that cannot perish. The mystic does not mourn the burning, he bows before it, knowing that what he called destruction was really refinement. In the ashes lies the memory of light. Every grain carries the imprint of the fire that once lived within it. The soul, humbled and emptied, sifts through this quiet residue and finds radiance waiting. It realizes that the beloved never left. He merely changed his form. The glow that rises from ruin is gentler, deeper, no longer a blaze that blinds, but a warmth that heals. When the fire subsides, the heart sits among the ashes and listens. There is no voice, only presence. The stillness speaks in ways the flame could not. In that silence, the mystic understands the purpose of burning was not to destroy, but to uncover the light buried within. The ashes are not a grave, but a mirror made of surrender. The soul must burn to become transparent. Pride, fear, identity, all must turn to ash before the hidden brilliance can appear. What remains is weightless, for the self that clung has been reduced to powder. The wind of divine mercy carries it, scattering it across the field of being. The mystic becomes everywhere, belonging nowhere, a fragrance rather than a form. To find light in ashes is to recognize continuity in change. The flame and the dust are not opposites, but stages of remembrance. The burning reveals, the ashes preserve. The mystic who understands this no longer fears endings. He knows that the fire of divine love does not destroy, it transforms, moving everything toward its purest expression. The ashes are soft because they have let go of resistance. They hold no memory of struggle, only the quiet acceptance of what is. This softness is strength, for it reflects the final humility, the surrender of all becoming to being. The soul that reaches this state no longer asks for form, for even in formlessness, it recognizes the pulse of the beloved. The hidden light in ashes is not seen by the eyes, but felt by the heart. It flickers in stillness, not in brilliance. The mystic who seeks outward misses it. The one who waits inward finds it. This is the secret mercy of dissolution, that what seemed like death becomes the beginning of perception. Ashes are what remains when everything false has been burned away. They do not pretend, they do not hold, they simply are. In their quiet purity, they resemble the divine itself, formless yet full, invisible yet radiant. The soul learns from them how to exist without identity, to shine without claiming light. When all effort ends, revelation begins. The fire must consume striving before the ashes can reveal understanding. The mystic sits not as a victor, but as one who has vanished. And in that vanishing, he discovers the truest form of existence, one without center or circumference, where everything is flame, and flame is everything. The soul that has known fire becomes tender. It no longer fears the burning, for it has felt what lies beyond it, the coolness of mercy in the aftermath. The ashes whisper, asterisk, we have seen the blaze and survived it. We have lost everything and found peace in what remains. This is not despair, it is contentment that no storm can undo. The light hidden in ashes is the light that no longer needs to prove itself. It does not dazzle, it endures. It is the radiance of completion, the calm after creation's fever. The mystic recognizes it as the light of subsistence, the glow of what remains after everything perishable has fallen away. In the quiet of ashes, the soul becomes fluent in stillness. There is no more searching, only beholding. The beloved's presence is no longer an event, but an atmosphere, subtle, constant, complete. The mystic breathes it in and realizes that the light he sought was not above, but within the dust of his own undoing. Every burning prepares the soul for greater light. Without the fire, the heart remains opaque. Without the ashes, it cannot hold what it has seen. Thus, the journey is circular: fire to ash, ash to light, light to remembrance. The mystic lives this rhythm as prayer, rising from each ruin more luminous than before. The ashes carry a silence deeper than words, for they have nothing left to say. In them, the mystic hears the echo of divine stillness, the state where will and surrender are one. To rest among the ashes is to rest in God, for there is no self left to separate. The dust that was once you becomes the ground of everything holy. The fire teaches motion, but ashes teach being. What blazed with passion now rests with purpose. The mystic no longer seeks experience. He abides in awareness. The world's noise fades into background, and even light becomes secondary to peace. To dwell in ashes is to dwell in the aftermath of revelation, where everything has already been said. The ashes remind the soul that even endings are sacred. They are the testimony of transformation, the body of what once burned for truth. To hold them is to hold the memory of the divine's touch. The mystic carries them not as grief, but as gratitude, for they are the proof that love has passed through. From ashes, the wind of remembrance rises. It carries with it the fragrance of surrender, the sweetness of having been undone. The mystic feels himself scattered into the vastness, no longer a single spark, but part of the infinite glow. The boundary between self and source dissolves like smoke into air. The soul that finds the light in its own ashes is no longer afraid of dying, for it has already died and lived again. What was burned away was never essential. What remains is eternal. The mystic stands in stillness, radiant not with borrowed light, but with the quiet fire of knowing that even in ruin, nothing was ever lost. And in the final hush, the ashes rise not as smoke, but as illumination. They drift upward, shimmering with the memory of fire, carrying the soul beyond form, into presence. The mystic gazes upon them and smiles, whispering, "The light I sought was hidden in what I feared to lose. I am the flame, I am the ash, I am the one who burns and remains." When all the fires have burned and all the searching has ended, the soul stands before its own ashes, not as a mourner, but as one newly born. It realizes that what it called destruction was simply the beloved's way of clearing the space where his reflection could finally appear. Nothing was lost in the burning. Everything false was only returned to its origin, dust, remembering its light. The mystic bows not before the fire, nor the ash, but before the secret that moved through both. He understands now that love is not found in holding, but in dissolving, in becoming transparent enough for the divine to see himself through you. The ashes do not whisper of what has ended, but of what was eternal all along. They glow with the quiet certainty that even ruin serves revelation. In that stillness, the heart no longer prays for safety, nor fears being undone. It knows now that every fall was a rising, every silence a speech, every end a return. The soul that has seen its own burning no longer seeks to shine it. Simply times is asterisk, luminous by nature, radiant through surrender. The mystic walks away from the ashes not empty, but infinite, carrying within him the secret flame that never truly dies. He whispers into the wind, "What I thought was the end was only your beginning in me." And the ashes, still warm with mercy, answer softly, "You were the light all along."